the million-dollar, billion-dollar question, Arnold, you know, that everybody has on their mind is how do you get the cruise industry, how do you get passengers back on ships, how do you get ships back at sea safely and responsibly around the world?
Well, you know, Carol, first of all, you know, our primary responsibilities and therefore our top priority is always compliance, environmental protection, and the health, safety, and well-being of our guests, of the people and the places we go, and of course, our Carnival family, our shipboard and shoreside personnel. So, you know, the interests of public health is always in the forefront for us. And how do we get people back on ships? When there's social gathering and society has developed the compensating measures that is comfortable with, that we have effectively mitigated the spread of COVID-19, then we'll be able to cruise again. Now, there are a lot of people, as you know, Carol, who are ready to cruise right now. And in fact, we're looking at starting up in Europe where the spread has been mitigated substantially in places like Germany and Italy. And we're looking at starting up in September there, and a few cruise lines have. But there's a lot of pent-up demand, you know, for travel in general and especially for cruise.
Well, and what I wonder, Arnold, though, can you kind of drill down a little bit? What are some of the specific protocols that you might put in place to get ships safely back at sea? I've been reading, you know, about different folks and what they might be considering, different cruise lines. They're talking about no buffets, constant temperature checks, constant testing, maybe no excursions. What specific protocols will you be putting in place?
Well, again, as you well know, we have a lot of measures in place already on cruise that often shoreside destinations don't already have or didn't have prior to COVID-19. We do medical screens. We're already doing temperature checks in many cases. We had hand sanitizers throughout the ship and signs all over about washing your hands because we've had to deal with viruses in the over 700 ports and destinations we go to annually for many years. Now, of course, COVID-19 is especially unique because the whole world is shut down. And because of that, there's still a lot of learning around COVID-19. As you know from all the scientists, they're still aligning around epidemiology, they're aligning around testing, they're aligning around the role of testing. The one thing everybody right now is aligned on, though, is that, you know, good personal care in terms of wearing a mask, washing your hands, using hand sanitizers, you know, physical distancing at the appropriate times, but wearing a mask is a great way to mitigate the spread. So for the time being, any cruises that will happen will certainly incorporate some physical distancing and, you know, wearing masks. And of course, what we already had was the hand sanitizers, et cetera. Beyond that, there's a plethora of possibilities, but it depends on the destination, depends on the level of community spread in that destination, et cetera. So there could be various testing protocols. I mean, that's a possibility. For the U.S., it's premature. You know, we're not ready to sail here yet. Obviously, the community spread is still pretty vibrant here in the U.S.
Right.
And we're not in a position to sail here. And we're walking cautiously in the other places, too, because our primary interest is to stand with everyone else in mitigating the spread of COVID-19.
But I did read your Costa Cruises safety protocols, and you talked about 3 tests for crew members before boarding. You also talked about, of course, social distancing, new filters. Entertainment will have more shows on during the day so that there's smaller groups, and then also no self-service restaurants, so no buffets, which for many who go on a cruise, they're pretty used to it. So there are some changes coming.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. For the ones that are going to sail now, we have to be ready, just like hotels today. Any hotel that's open today has to deal with the current situation and the limited knowledge there is. And so for Costa, we are deploying a number of testing protocols. Obviously, for our crew, we have not only testing, but quarantine, et cetera, because it's really important for us to have the crew you know, safe from the beginning and then to keep them safe. And obviously, once we get guests on board, we'll have protocols on board for them.
I do wonder how you do it safely. I mean, Arnold, you know this industry better than everyone and better than most in terms of lay personnel. But I wonder how you do it safely, because there have been some smaller cruise operations that have come out of Europe, come out of Alaska, Tahiti. And I believe there were at least 10 crew members aboard your AIDA cruise ships out of Germany that contacted the virus ahead of you getting ready to kind of get back to the seas. That was in August. So I just wonder, how do you do this safely even when some small cruise operations are starting to go back out on the water and still having problems with the virus and people are contacting the virus?
Carol, I think there's 2 stages. One is you want to reduce the risk of having the COVID-19 come on board from shore. So that's the first thing. So you test and you monitor and you quarantine in the case of the crew. So the ones you mentioned on AIDA, those crew members were tested before they left their home country, and then they were tested again once they arrived in Germany. And we got some positives. They were then retested again. In several of those cases, the individuals got a double negative test after that, which meant they had a false positive. And then the others were obviously isolated and quarantined, and so the risk of them spreading it on board was zero because we wouldn't have them sail. Okay. Now, once you're at that level, the next question is, what else are you doing to mitigate spread? And that's where all the other practices on board. In the event you do get someone on board who has COVID-19, if it's in society, if it's out there in general, chances are you eventually will have someone on board a ship that will have it. And so the trick then, of course, is to make certain that you are able to quickly identify that, you can isolate the person, and that during the time they were exposed, there was plenty of mitigation of risk protocols in place, so the probability of spread has been greatly reduced. And that's where wearing masks, physical distancing, washing your hands, using a hand sanitizer, et cetera, all come into play.
Arnold, I do also wonder, what are your plans for passengers and crew members who do get sick in the future? You know the horror stories of ships that were, basically lost at sea. They couldn't find a home port. I know, and your team have spent, a long time repatriating, your crew members back home. So what do you do? Will there be a way to airlift passengers off ships? What will you do?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We had to repatriate over 80,000 crew members, and it took us quite a while with borders closed and airlines shut down, et cetera. So it took us several months to effectively do that, but we were eventually able to do it. With regards to now, that was before. Now there's enough understanding. We would not go to a destination where we did not have a plan already in the event that there was COVID on board. We're not going to tie up thousands of people off of one positive COVID case or a couple of positive COVID cases. We would have the protocols in place to ensure, one, that the individual is taken care of, whoever has it, that we can get them the care they need. And then number two, that everyone else is unaffected. We would have some form of contact tracing on board so we know who were the most exposed people. But we have to have those protocols for each destination. We go to 700 ports and destinations around the world. So they're all not going to have the exact same protocols. But we will not go to a place where we haven't established exactly, in the event there is a COVID case, exactly what's going to happen.
All right, but you're not worried about, as we know, this virus, spreads so quickly, that you could go out to sea and end up with a handful of passengers or a lot more passengers, hundreds of passengers, and be kind of stuck at sea again. I mean, I'm just curious, kind of the worst case scenario, Arnold, what would you do in that case?
We won't sail on a situation where we could be stuck at sea.